Hello, and welcome to a special winecast for the tasting group Just in the Nick of Wine. As you probably know by now, my name is Bob Brinson, and I manage the group. So you might be asking yourself, why is this some sort of special winecast? Well, ordinarily for the winecast, I typically pull a bottle of wine out of my own collection. However, before publishing them, I always like to offer the winery the chance to review my content in order to make sure that all my facts are accurate. As a result, some of these wineries have actually begun contacting me to assess their wine and to potentially produce additional tasting videos, as is the case here. Please be assured, regardless of how I may happen to come across the wine, I will always provide an honest assessment, and at least at this point, I'm not being compensated in any other way. However, I still feel the need to provide full disclosure to you, the viewer, that the assessment isn't in any way being influenced. So with that, let's get right to this special bottle of wine. In a previous episode, I shared with you a wine from the folks at Auburn James. For that winecast, I focused in on Phaeton, which represents itself as a fine Bordeaux blend. What I'm going to share with you in this episode is their wonderful Chardonnay. Now let me begin with the fact that I'm not a big fan of big, oaky, buttery Chardonnays from California. And Danielle is even less of a fan. Now that's not to say that I don't enjoy Chards, because that's quite the contrary. I just prefer my Chards to be aged in stainless, or at the very least a combination of stainless and oak. They usually tend to be much cleaner and brighter that way. And that's exactly what you'll find with this Auburn James Chardonnay. It's actually aged in stainless with oak shards, which produces a crisp, bright, clean taste. What I like to refer to as a wonderful summer deck wine. It tends to almost come across as a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. This is definitely a wine that can be enjoyed on a hot summer day. Danielle and I can certainly see ourselves just sipping this in the late afternoon on our deck, thus the summer deck wine reference. It can be served on its own, let's say as your guests begin to arrive, to be something to greet them with. However, it still could be paired with a number of items. For instance, we could see this nicely being paired with a salad or fruit plate, such as with slices of pear, green apple, perhaps some brie cheese drizzled with honey. For our tasting, I actually enjoyed this with some dill cheese. It also went very well with champagne cheese, which really only makes sense. Perhaps this would accompany well with some non-spicy seafood. However, with a bit more thought, where I would normally have paired a dish with let's say a dry Riesling, this wine could easily go in its place. For instance, I'd be curious to see how this wine would work with a spicy seafood gumbo. As it turns out, our community wine club is actually doing a gumbo night in September, and I would really be curious to see how this wine would pair with that. Danielle and I both thought the bottle itself was very, very interesting. You know, I always like to keep my eye out for attention to detail. If we zoom in on the label, hopefully you can see what I mean here. I love the fact that the details are actually stamped into the label. Very unique. In conversations with the winery after the fact, they said they'd like to keep that constant antique car motif. So this was their way of paying homage to the cars of that period. It at least gives the perspective that each bottle is unique and special. I especially like the fact that the bottles are actually numbered. That to me is incredible. Auburn James verified that each bottle is truly numbered and tracked. I think this would be great from, an eclectic perspective, along with the fact that it would allow for some great quality control and monitoring. I know, this all may come across as a bit geeky. Can't help it. It just comes from my experience as a former Xerox engineer in a previous life. As I stated before, if this were a blind tasting, I would have swore that this was a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. The stone fruit and grassy notes just lend itself that way. We really, really enjoyed this bottle of wine. At the risk of coming across the wrong way, I would say that this could be enjoyed as an everyday drinkable wine. I view this wine as versatile and could be enjoyed in so many different ways. Unlike the Auburn James Phaeton, which is one of those extraordinarily special wines, that really needs to be served under just the right circumstances to thoroughly maximize the experience, this Chardonnay could be enjoyed without having to go through all of those mental gymnastics of trying to figure out how to showcase it. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm in no way trying to downplay this wine because it is truly wonderful. The fact that it can stand on its own is actually a great thing. Now, let me just close with this one last little detail. The Auburn James Winery does have all of the necessary licensing to ship to Tennessee, and that just makes it even better. However, if you do happen to find your way out to St. Helena, California, they have a very nice laid-back cottage to enjoy a tasting. So, as always, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this winecast. And please, pass it on to your friends or other folks that you know that enjoy wine. My name is Bob Brenson, and until next time,